Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This video is going to be your second video in the Scratch curriculum. Today we're going to be taking a look at the looks of Scratch. Now, looks is extremely important since most of your games that you guys will be creating will be pretty much character based. And by this, I mean most of the things that you're going to be controlling in your game are usually going to be characters moving around, changing, fighting, whatever it is. Well, in most cases, you don't want a still figure like this. Imagine trying to move the character and all he does is stay still but move around. I mean, imagine how weird that would look. Thankfully, we have many ways to, you know, mess around with the sprite in general. So here I have a basic when flag clicked, so whenever we run this, we can test out our code. We'll start from the top and go down. We have the first block called say hello for 2 seconds. Now this is a block that can make your sprite say anything for any amount of seconds. So let's say 5. So when I click this, when I click the green flag, it's going to say anything for 5 seconds. Now, if you don't want the sprite to say something for a certain amount of seconds, you can resolve to using just the say. The say block is a block that will permanently make the sprite say whatever you want it to say. Now, this has pretty little uses since you don't want that hello thing sticking around for too long. If you wanted the sprite to say something at the end of your game forever until the user ends the game, or something like that, maybe thanks for playing. If we run this, the sprite's gonna say thanks for playing for, well, as long as the player doesn't exit the screen. Next, we have a different alteration of the say block. Here we have the think blocks, which work the same way as the say blocks, except it just pops out differently. So if I run this, you can see that it's a thought bubble that pops up. Let's compare it with both of them. So in just the say, there's a actual sort of saying bubble. In a think block, it puts up like a cloud-like bubble. And both of these blocks are just different ways of making the sprite say something. Now we have the really important blocks in looks that you will be using for most of your Scratch coding. This is called the switch costume. Now, this block is a block that automatically switches your sprite to a different costume you might have. Now for this video's sake, I've already created 4 costumes here. It's pretty basic. I've just moved around a few items here and there, and I've made the sprite look like he's running in these 4 costumes. So when I use switch costume to 4, when I run this, the costume will change to whatever costume 4 was set to. Now obviously you can customize the costume name. If you go to costumes right here, we'll set this to end of running. So now I have a new name for this last costume. So yeah, obviously, as you can see, it's a switch costume to, and it lists every single one of the costumes that are available. Now, I highly recommend you guys naming your costumes, because when you have a game that uses hundreds of costumes, which I'll bet you are going to have in the future, you'll need to know which costume is which. Now, it can be extremely basic. I mean, these 4 costumes all just represent the sprite running. So I can have start of running, middle running 2, and end of running. So I can name them like that. And when you're coding, it's much easier to see which costume you're trying to pick. Now, the next block is the next costume block. The next costume block is a bit more useful than just switch costume block. The next costume block is basically like the switch costume, but you can only change one at a time. So right now I'm on the end of running costume. If I run this, it's going to switch to the first costume I had. If I go again, second, third, and back to the fourth. So the next costume will switch the sprite to whatever is in line next. So if it's on the fourth one, the next one in line is 1. And once it switches it, the sprite stays like that, just like the switch costume one. Now, let's talk about backdrops. Backdrops are really important in most games, and I'm sure it'll come in handy for your game. Now, backdrops are pretty simple to create. It's up to you what you want to add in the back. For instance, we'll take the color black, and if I increase the size of the screen, I can just write a line, just any line in general. So once I'm done making this, so you can see here, you can see here that it pops up as the background. Now you can create as many backdrops as you want to switch between, or you can create costumes between backdrops to switch. So say this is my next costume, it'll pop up here. You can switch between these two by just clicking on them. In a second, I'll show you how you can do this in your code. This is the basics of creating the backdrop. You can also use shapes in your backdrops, like a square right here, or you can create a circle. Now for the code part of your backdrop. Now you'll notice here that whatever code I already had is deleted. And if you go to the motion blocks, it says stage selected, no motion blocks. Now, the way a stage works rather than a sprite is the stage can't really move anywhere. It only switches to fit with the character. So let's go to when flag clicked. And if we go back to looks, we'll say switch backdrop to backdrop 2. Now, as you can see here, since a backdrop is already backdrop 2, it's going to stay that way. And if you do backdrop 1, it'll switch between backdrop 2 and backdrop 1. And in the same manner, you can also use the next backdrop and keep on switching in between. Now you'll also notice that even though we have no code here present for the cat continues to switch between costumes as we switch every backdrop. Now this is really important for you to understand. If we click on the sprite down here, we can see that this also has when flag click next costume. And if we go back to motion blocks here, you can see the motion blocks have popped up again. The code that you put inside a sprite and the code that you put inside backdrops are different. Whatever you put in the sprite can't be applied to background, and vice versa. You can't put the next backdrop in the sprite area and expect the sprite to switch to the next costume. So when we run this, we are collectively running this code in the sprite, and we are also running this code in the backdrop. Lastly, we have change size or set size to percentage. Now change size won't matter too much in the end, but you can use it in some games. If we say change size by 10 and run this, you can see the cat slowly gets bigger until, well, he's gonna go off the screen if you keep on going anymore. Now you can just revert this by putting a -10 here, and he'll slowly become smaller. Now we also have an easier way to change the size instead of changing it by a certain number. You can change it by a percentage. If you go and set it to 10%, you'll see the cat becomes extremely small here. And that's because when this block says set size to 10%, it'll divide the size of whatever you have. So our normal size would be this one right here. It'll divide that size by 10 and it will become extremely small. Now say you want to just go back to the normal size, that would be 100%. And if you want to increase it by twice the amount, then that's 200%, and so on. You can set it to whatever you need. Oh, and one more thing. There's these blocks called show and hide, which make your cat disappear when you use hide. So if you hide the sprite doesn't go anywhere. He's still there. As you can see, when I click this, that blue box appears showing where the sprite is. It's just you've hidden him from the screen. Now if you use the block show again, he'll pop up again and he'll stay here. So that's it for today's video. You'll learn more about the rest of the looks blocks in other more advanced videos. Things like graphic effects and color and all of these will require a bit more knowledge about all the blocks. So in the next video, you'll be learning about sound blocks.